Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we re-diving into the world of Hollywood war movies and taking a closer look at one of their favorite subjects. The mighty tanks of World War II. We've all seen those epic scenes. Steel giants racing across fields, shells flying and massive explosions lighting up the screen. It's thrilling, it's dramatic, and it's almost completely wrong. Hollywood has created a powerful image of tank warfare, but the reality was far grittier, slower, and honestly, a lot more terrifying for the crews inside. So, buckle up as we debunk some of the biggest myths Hollywood has taught us about World War II tanks. First up, let's talk about the classic tank duel. In movies, we often see two tanks, like a Sherman and a Tiger, speeding towards each other across an open field, maneuvering like race cars, and firing on the move. It looks like a deadly ballet of steel. The truth? Most tank-on-tank combat was incredibly slow. Think less of a high-speed chase and more of a tense stationary shootout. Tanks of that era were not designed for agility at high speeds. Their suspension systems were basic, and driving fast over rough terrain was a bone-jarring experience that could easily throw a track, leaving the tank completely immobile and a sitting duck. Furthermore, the idea of accurately firing while bouncing around is pure fantasy. World War II tanks had no gun stabilization. Imagine trying to aim a rifle while riding a mechanical bull. That's what it was like for a gunner, to have any chance of hitting a target, especially one at a distance. The tank commander would order the driver to stop completely. The gunner would then take careful aim, fire, and hope for the best. Often the tank would then quickly move to a new position to avoid return fire before stopping to aim again. So real tank battles were a methodical, nerve-wracking process of stop, aim, fire, move. They were engagements fought at a walking pace, or more often, from a complete standstill, with crews desperately trying to get the first accurate shot in. Next, let's address the big booms. In films like Fury, when a tank gets hit, it often erupts in a massive, spectacular fireball that sends the turret flying into the air. It makes for a great visual, but it's a huge exaggeration of what usually happened. While it's true that tanks could brew up, this was not the most common outcome of being hit. The primary anti-tank ammunition of the war was the armor-piercing, or a P round. This was essentially a solid chunk of metal designed to punch through armor, not explode on contact. When an AP shell penetrated a tank's hull, it didn't create a huge explosion. Instead, it would shatter on the inside, creating a storm of red-hot metal fragments called spall. This spall would fly around the cramped crew compartment at incredible speeds, ricocheting off the walls. It was this shrapnel that did the real damage, killing or horribly wounding the crew. The tank itself might be relatively intact from the outside with just a small hole in the armor, but inside, it would be a scene of devastation. The tank would simply stop working because the crew inside was no longer able to operate it. Catastrophic explosions, where the ammunition inside the tank detonated, were known as cooking off. This did happen, especially with certain tank designs like the early Sherman. But it was not the instantaneous, guaranteed outcome of every penetrating hit that movies would have us believe. More often than not, a knocked-out tank was a silent one, its crew lost to the deadly storm of metal within. Now let's move on to urban combat. Movies often show a tank shell zipping clean through multiple walls of a building before exploding. A lone hero hides behind a wall. The shell passes right through, and he's miraculously fine. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how tank shells worked. The most common shell used against buildings and infantry was the high explosive, or HE round. Unlike an armor-piercing shot, an HE shell was designed to detonate on impact. It had a sensitive fuse at its tip. The moment it hit a surface, any surface like the first brick wall of a house, it would explode. The purpose of an HE shell wasn't to punch a neat hole. It was to blast a target with explosive force and shrapnel. In city fighting, tanks didn't shoot asterisk through asterisk buildings. They shot asterisk at asterisk them. A single HE round from a 75mm gun could blow a massive hole in a brick wall, exposing the soldiers inside. If a building was being used as a strong point, a tank wouldn't try to snipe enemies through windows. It would systematically demolish the building, firing shell after shell to collapse the floors and walls on top of the defenders. This was a brutal and effective tactic. So, if you were a soldier in a building and a tank had its sights on you, hiding behind an interior wall wouldn't save you. The entire structure was about to come down around you. Another huge misconception is about what a tank crew can actually see. In movies, we get these cool point-of-view shots from the commander's cupola or the driver's slit, showing a wide, clear view of the battlefield. The reality was claustrophobic and terrifyingly limited. The driver looked through a narrow slot barely wider than his eyes, or through periscopes that gave a distorted, narrow field of view. The gunner was even worse off. Spent most of his time staring through a telescopic sight, which was like looking down a drinking straw, focused only on a small patch of the battlefield. The rest of the crew had tiny vision ports, if any at all. This created a situation known as being buttoned up, where the crew was sealed inside the steel coffin with almost no situational awareness. They were effectively blind and deaf to the world outside, relying on the commander for all information. This is why you so often see historical photos and footage of tank commanders sticking their heads and torsos out of the top hatch. It was incredibly dangerous. A commander exposed like this was a prime target for snipers and shrapnel, but it was a risk they had to take. Without that direct panoramic view of the battlefield, the tank was blind. The commander was the eyes and ears of the vehicle, spotting threats, identifying targets, and directing the driver and gunner. The choice was a stark one. Stay safe inside and be blind, or expose yourself to mortal danger just to see what was going on. It was a constant, terrifying gamble. Finally, let's tackle the dramatic tank ram. We've seen it in games and movies. A desperate, heroic move where one tank rams another, disabling it in a clash of steel. It looks awesome, but it was almost never a deliberate tactic. Why? Because it was practically suicide. Tanks are incredibly heavy, complex machines. Smashing two of them together at speed would be catastrophic for both vehicles. The tracks, suspension, and drive systems would be mangled. It was far more likely to disable your own tank than the enemy's. Even worse was the effect on the crew. Imagine being inside a metal box that crashes into another metal box. The force of the impact would throw the crew around like ragdolls. They'd be slammed into the hard steel interior, suffering broken bones, concussions, or worse. The driver, in particular, was in extreme danger. Remember, the goal of a tank crew was to destroy the enemy and survive. Deliberately ramming another tank achieved the first goal unreliably, while making the second almost impossible. While accidental collisions certainly happened in the chaos of battle, no sane commander would ever order a ram as a primary tactic. There were far more effective ways to knock out an enemy tank that didn't involve wrecking your own vehicle and crew in the process. So there you have it. The real world of World War II tank combat was a far cry from the high-octane action we see on screen. It was a slow, methodical, and claustrophobic affair, fought by crews who were often half-blind and incredibly vulnerable. While Hollywood movies give us thrilling entertainment, it's important to remember the grim reality faced by the real tankers. They weren't action heroes and racing machines. They were brave soldiers sealed in steel coffins, fighting in some of the most brutal conditions imaginable. The real story is one of incredible courage in the face of terrifying odds. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you found this interesting, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into military history.